and an MSc cum laude, and currently is pursuing a PhD. So Neo has held pivotal roles across the healthcare ecosystem, including being a clinical study coordinator, a clinical research associate, and a medical science liaison. So beyond his corporate and academic roles, Neo also wears other hats, such as he has been a freelance oncology dossier reviewer at a regulatory authority. He contributes to the evaluation of medicines for quality, safety, and efficacy. And he has been an ad hoc member of the HPCSA Professional Conduct Committee. Um, he is a Young African Leaders Initiative alumnus, which is yearly. And Neo has moved from the cytogenetics lab to strategical global medical affairs. He is passionate about mentoring emerging scientists, in case maybe you might need a mentor. And he advocates for bold science-led leadership that transforms healthcare systems and delivers meaningful change for patients across the continent. So this is who we are hosting today. So whether you are like starting out or looking to elevate your career and you're looking to move into these fields, since he has had a diverse reach in terms of the careers that he has been part of, it would be good for you to listen to our session today and also think of questions that you may ask him as well. Um, I'm gonna open the floor to Mr. Neo to kind of give us his background and journey, and then we're gonna ask him to, can you talk us like through your educational pathways, to joining your to your school journey as well, and how you transitioned from scientific academic path into medical affairs as well. So we're gonna hand this over to you.
All right. Thank you so much, Puseletso, for such an elaborate introduction. Before getting into my journey, I just want to just give a disclaimer that, the views that I will express in this, discussion forum are of myself, and they do not represent the company that I work for. All right. So I do not have a slide deck to present. I thought we'll just have a discussion, Puseletso. And of course, should I should I go like beyond time, just let me know, because I think we have an hour to go through the journey, and then of course I'll go through the questions. So as Puseletso have said, I am a certified medical laboratory scientist. I studied Bachelor's of Health Science at Cape Peninsula University of Technology. And I studied this degree when they first introduced the professional degrees. Previously, these were National Diploma and BTech, as some of you might be aware. So they phased away at the time around 2011, 2012, the National Diploma BTech route. To enable, people that studied such degrees to actually articulate into higher degrees, because there were multiple steps. If a person who was studying at a traditional University of Technology to transition to a traditional university, they had to do an additional qualification to be able to do a master's, for example. So they sort of created this professional degrees that incorporated HPCSA registration. So I did that degree when it was first rolled out. I think we were the second, cohort that, completed the degree. And essentially, I was pretty much the first to register in cytogenetics with this degree. I think it was around 2015 when we first completed this. I think myself and some lady in Cape Town were the first to register in cytogenetics. So pretty much what made me decide to study or take this particular career path was because my aunt works in healthcare, and every school holiday when I visited her in KwaZulu-Natal, She used to take me with her at work, and then she would leave me, with the medical technology. She would leave me by the lab because I had expressed that I'm interested in laboratory medicine. So the people in the lab would take me through all the benches. They would show me around the work that they do, and I mean, they explain in details. They explain the science behind doing certain things. So that really inspired me. I was really excited at the time, and kind of helped me in terms of making a decision what I wanted to study when I go to university. I think somebody is speaking. I don't know if you want to ask a question or okay. So yeah, that was the journey then. So I was very clear in terms of career choice in that it has to be science. So having to choose between commercial route or science, I knew very early on that I wanted to become a scientist or follow a science route, and specifically medical science route. Because I could see, and from the explanations that they gave me, and I could see how that science was actually translated in terms of impacting patients' life. Whether they were doing UNE or they were looking for microorganisms under the microscope, there would be a specific, patient on the other side, waiting for such results to make a meaningful impact in their life, in terms of the cost of antibiotic that they get given, or whether they have diabetes or they don't, or monitoring their blood pressure. It just made sense to me that it's a science that is immediately translatable. So I chose that path. I studied BHSC, and then how I decided in terms of the specializations, because the course had about 11 electives. So you had to choose one elective, and then back in our days, you had to write a board exam, which was a standardized exam across the country, and that was managed by the SMLTSA. Okay. So how I decided to go into cytogenetics is because they usually allow you to do like in-service training or like a rotation across multiple disciplines. So you'd spend I don't know, like every maybe three weeks each in each discipline, and then you go to different hospitals as part of the course. So the course was very practical in that it will allow you opportunities to go in the discipline, like go to the blood bank, for example, and shadow the people that work in the blood bank for 3 weeks and see what they do and write assessments and that type of thing. So I've seen all kinds of medical laboratory operations, and I particularly fell in love with cytogenetics because it was visual. So early on, I picked up even throughout the career, I mean the degree, that I'm a very visual person. I understand things in terms of images. So the courses such as hematology, morphology made sense to me, and I'll pick it up very quickly. Modules such as cytopathology, I'll pick it up very quickly. you know so I noticed that I'm a very visual person, and at the same time, I've always liked genetics, from when we studied life science in school. So studying Down syndrome and all that. So I decided that, what, I'll give it a shot. I'll spend my 18 months in cytogenetics, doing chromosomes. I mean, I was exposed to constitutional cytogenetics and acquired cytogenetics, which is cancers, where they do cancer diagnostics, lymphomas, leukemias, childhood leukemias. All that stuff was very, very interesting. But one thing I learned there was that there's always like a shift. When you're working and doing the practicum in the lab is not the same as when you're learning in school, because as you know, pathology labs are accredited laboratories and they follow very strict rules. So I don't think when I was that young, I don't think I was that person that um, I would like to think of myself as an nonconformist. I did not really like the fact that the rules were so strict that you can't deviate even a little bit. You can't even flinch. You can't even suggest a thing about the operations there. So anyway, in terms of the fit for me, with operating in a routine diagnostic lab, I was already starting to question my career choices, and it was quite frustrating. because you are there, you are young, you are full of ideas, you want to explore things, and in that space you can't, because look, here we're dealing with patients' lives. Here we follow the SOP, and here, um, even if you have outrageous, ideas, you cannot experiment. You see, so that became quickly frustrating for me. And of course, I mean, like, being in that space for, like, say 15 months or 18 months, doing the practical work, it allows you to gain, technical mastery, over the science, over the techniques, over, the procedures, and that in itself give you confidence. Give you confidence as you develop that. And of course, I've written the board exams and all that. And then, after passing the board exams and everything, I got back to my parents and I said, you know what? I don't think I'm gonna continue with this with this field. I think I'm gonna study something else. So you can imagine 4 years of patients, I mean parents sacrificing, a lot for you, and then you come back and you say, look, I don't think this is me. So it happens, and um, at the time they were very resistant to me actually studying something, and so they're like, doesn't make sense, that. But what I was quite fortunate in that, even studying the 4-year degree, I had received funding support, from the NHLS, which I'm still very much grateful for. I studied the degree like pretty much for free. They funded me from second year, and even at the time when I was doing my practicals. And then, of course, at the time, there were some issues in terms of the provincial allocation of budgets, and the posts were actually frozen. So I was like, good shot. So the fact that the posts were frozen in the NHLS, I could not be placed. It was a good reason. It was enough reason for me to convince my parents that I cannot work in the lab because I'll be forced to stay at home. The posts are frozen. So, eventually, during that period, I applied for a scholarship with the Department of Science and Technology, and then I got into a nanoscience program. All right. So when I got into the nanoscience program, it was, of course, a research degree. Excited that, what, eventually I will get to explore my ideas. So yeah, I pretty much closed off the chapter of cytogenetics. As exciting as it was to me, um, yeah, I had to move on. So I got into like a research space now, but because I still had the passion for genetics as a science, or human genetics as a science, when I moved over to my master's, I then chose a project that related to genetic toxicology. Okay, so I was registered with the University of Johannesburg, but my project was actually based at National Institute for Occupational Health. Okay, so so basically I had two supervisors, one at the University of Johannesburg, and this was a pure chemist, and then I had a toxicologist at NIOH who accepted the proposal when I said I want to bridge the two, nanoscience, or the synthesis of engineered nanoparticles, and I want to see the effect of this on the genes. It's something that was never done before at that time, but what I've read was that that particular toxicologist was validating instruments to actually be able to do that type of testing. So that was interesting. So I was at the NIOH for around about 3 years doing that type of research. And what was really challenging for me when I first got into the nanoscience program was the fact that I had to do a lot of adjustments in terms of moving away from biological sciences now to pure chemistry. I had to learn nanochemistry. I had to learn how to synthesize nanocrystals in the lab, to set up, to do transmission electron microscopy, which is part of the physicochemical characterization. So you need to understand the properties of the materials that you're making, before you even move on to the other side. So that was a bit challenging, but I was able to overcome those challenges by actually partnering with all kinds of scholars, even in other departments, biotechnology departments, students that were doing their PhD, even the postdocs there, to say, you know what, I'm at the point where I don't know what I'm doing. So I was humble enough at times, to get back to the basics and say, look, I need help. So, but I've met incredible people, research scholars from India, and Japan that were part of the department that really, really assisted me a lot with the synthesis and characterization of my material. And then when I moved to NIOH, it was seamless because it was pretty much biological sciences. And having gotten training in cytogenetics where we grow cells, we literally grow cells with every sample that we get. So doing cell cultures as part of my research was exciting and it was easy. I didn't require much training. I was competent. So that's why getting back to the point to say technical mastery gives you confidence, so much confidence, and then of course I completed the project, um, and in terms of the physical part of doing experimentation, but now I was left with writing the thesis and then submitting. The supervisor that I had at UJ insisted that, look, you cannot get out of this program without a paper. This work is so important, you got to publish. By that time, it was probably 3.5 years or 4 years, towards 4 years of being in the program. And I was livid that, you know what, why do I need a research paper for this? I've submitted my thesis, and you told me that I got good marks. So it literally took an additional 1 year for me to eventually publish because I was hesitant and I'm like, okay, the figure I'm done with my wet lab, I'm going to actually go back and work. And I applied for a job, and I got a job at Empath in cytogenetics. Okay, and when I got back into cytogenetics, I was literally trying to convince myself that maybe Cape Town, when I was working at Hotiske, maybe it was the environment, maybe if I go to another province, I meet a different set of people, maybe I might like the discipline. But getting into the cytogenetics lab now as a qualified cytogeneticist and doing the work there, competency obviously is still ISO 15189, you're still compliant. Okay, but I realized very quickly that this is this is still not me. So 6 months was enough for me to operate in a cytogenetics lab, and I decided to actually transition. And meanwhile, you remember, I have not completed my master's. I just completed the wet lab, and then I'm writing my thesis, and then now I'm at the crossroads in terms of what is it I really want to do, you know. So while working in a cytogenetics lab, that's when an opportunity presented itself in sales at Merck Life Sciences. I was very familiar with Merck Life Sciences because as I was working at the NIOH, they were ordering a lot of the consumables. Water systems were actually serviced by Sigma Aldrich or Merck Life Sciences. I think they merged. Merck bought Sigma, so they were one. But yeah, in terms of buying acetone, methanol, and whatnot, I was very aware of those people. So when an opportunity to, you know, when opportunity to when opportunity presented itself to work in sales, I let on an opportunity, I applied, I interviewed, I got the role. Okay, so now being in a sales role, it is actually sales support role. You're pretty much not traveling, but you're doing everything sales wise in house. Okay, so you're phoning customers, you are following up on orders, you're placing orders, you're running quotations. So being in that space, it allowed me, or it opened up my mind, my awareness in terms of what's happening in the academia, research, and pathology space overall. So you tend to understand the entire healthcare ecosystem from that perspective, working there because you're supporting all the labs, even including NHLS labs in this instance, so, and of course you get exposed to other things such as customs, because this was actually a company that's based in Germany, importing chemicals and reagents, and and some of the frustrations that the people that ordered, I understood them very well because you are trying to synthesize something in the lab, it's sitting there with Sigma Aldrich or MEC, and your project, you're actually behind your project milestones. And then those scholars, the researchers would actually call and, frustration that, spew out, to me. And I'll try to do a lot of appeasing the gods, so to speak. So in terms of giving them estimated time of arrival. So, but anyway, I think that particular journey, it's the part that actually helped me in terms of stakeholder engagement. You tend to develop ways of communicating effectively through the challenges that people encounter in academia or research, clinical research, or basic research. Mostly we're supporting basic research at the time. And while I was there at Merck Life Sciences, I got in a very elaborate onboarding. And when they were doing the onboarding, they told us that there's actually a Merck down the road, another Merck down the road, but it is not us. So that was a bit confusing for me. Like, okay, there's a Merck in South Africa just down the road, but it's not. Yes, so they explained that this is a Merck Life Sciences, and then there's a Merck Sharp and Dome. So it was actually a family business, but the brothers kind of split. Others went to the US, and then others remained in Germany. So they continued manufacturing of chemicals in Germany. And then the brothers went on to study, to start a company in the US that was focused on medical, medicines. So the manufacturing of medicines. So, and that's the MSD that we now know. So immediately when they did the onboarding and they explained that there's actually a Merck Sharp and Dome down the road. So whenever you're receiving mail, you have to double check if it's Merck Life Sciences or Merck Sharp and Dome, because in the US, only in the US, MSD is called Merck. So in South Africa, we know it's registered as MSD. So, and then of course, that distinction made me, because I mean, coming again from a medical science background, made me curious to say, I wonder what these guys are doing. And of course, in that at that juncture of my journey, I realized that there's a whole world of clinical research. MSD does clinical research. They manufacture medicines. They do, all kinds of interesting stuff. I mean, at this point, I was not aware of clinical research world. The only exposure to clinical research world as a person that worked in the lab was when you would receive one or two samples once in a while of a bone marrow sample, that was part of the clinical trials, and they would give a procedure manual. So there were those specific samples that came with procedure manuals in terms of how to process them, and they were mostly coming from clinical research. So that is the only exposure that I had. At this point, I did not have any clue what clinical research was. But of course, I mean, hearing about MSD down the road, it just opens up curiosity to say, okay, what is what is it that they really do? And then you start reading up a little bit about it, and then you get exposed to the clinical research world, clinical trials and that type of thing. At this time, there is a friend, a medical technology friend of mine, that have left the lab and that was already working in clinical research. And this person was working as a clinical study coordinator at the University of Pretoria and Steve Biko Hospital. Okay, so I mean, I started contacting this old friend. I mean, he was also in cytogenetics, and he was registered in cytogenetics, and he had left the lab to support oncology clinical trials at Steve Biko. So immediately when I started inquiring about it to say, okay, I see this field is interesting and stuff, and tell me more about it. And I mean, as most of science graduates, the type of answers that they get when they request for information from their clinical research counterparts, is that you have to do GCP. And I learned about GCP while working in sales. Okay. And of course, I mean, working in a sales space, you know that everything is all about incentives, it's all about the numbers. So yeah, there as well, I got frustrated. I mean, I love the work. I love the work that we used to do. It was really nice, the environment, the work culture, amazing, perfect fit for me. I would have stayed. But I was just frustrated by the fact that the incentives varied, and at the time I was staying in Pretoria and traveling all the way to Modderfontein. I was like, hey, I'm spending so much, half of my salary on transport. So it became a little bit frustrating there as well. And it's like, and I was hooked on the idea of clinical research and, reading about it and all that. So, and as I said again, my friend told me that you've got to complete GCP if you want to get into clinical trials. I mean, I did not necessarily complete GCP at the time immediately, but at a later stage, of course, I sought resources, where I can register. I spoke to people, and they connected me with the right institutes, or organization where you can do like a verified GCP. I mean, you can do like an international GCP, but in South Africa, to work in South African clinical trials, you have to do South African GCP, because it's a little bit different. There are nuances in terms of um, the provisions in the South African GCP because of our history. So they kind of contextualize it to prevent abuse that's related to the history of South Africa. So it's important, to consider SAC GCP if you're really into clinical trials. So what transpired there is that, to cut the story short, an opportunity presented itself again in clinical research, and that very friend that I was communicating to, that told me about GCP, he reached out and he told me that, okay, they will be advertising a study coordinator role in this particular time frame, and I was on the lookout for it. And when it came out, I applied for it, but it was not advertised as a study coordinator role. They were looking for natural scientist. They were looking for natural slash medical scientist uh, at the Department of Health. It was a Department of Health circular. It said natural medical scientist. So that was weird. And then, of course, if you look on their website, also they do not say this is a study coordinator. They call them data managers. But because of the networks that I've leveraged on, I was able to get insights into what the role is about, essentially. And I applied for it. I interviewed for the role, and that's how I got into clinical trials. Okay. And it was the most amazing experience that I had working with patients. It was a patient-facing role at the time, and it was nice in that I did not have to learn everything from scratch, from the ground. All I had to learn was how to run clinical trials. But the therapeutic area already, as I said, technical mastery gives you so much confidence. I was already technically competent in terms of oncology, in terms of understanding hematological malignancies, in terms of understanding solid tumors, waking up a patient, doing the diagnostics, doing a person that comes with a breast cancer, when they do an FNA, I understood all that because I had learned um, all this when I was doing my practicum, when I was doing rotations in service trainings as part of the BHSC program. So everything just made so much sense. And yeah, and then of course you learn the clinical aspects of medical oncology, and then the GCP compliance, and you learn about the CRAs that come. You learn about site inspection. You learn about regulatory authorities' involvement in clinical trials. The FDA being sent to South Africa to audit some of the trials that have been running for over 10 years. Survivor follow-up trials that we're doing, where additional safety signals were being sought after. So it was such an amazing experience working in the medical oncology, because cancer diagnostics or oncology in general was such a passion of mine. And as you know, like, cancer is a genetic disease. So all the testings that was done, NGS testing, so we're sending tissue samples to Belgium, and they come with this long reports that shows all kinds of mutations that happened. Yes, that was most amazing. And I mean, at the time, they were running programs with, I don't want to mention the name of the sponsor, but they were doing programs that were looking at biomarkers, for specific cancers. So it was really interesting. And those biomarkers were helping to predict how the patients would do once they were put on that immunotherapy. That was interesting. And I was given that project as the lead study coordinator to run with it, and that was amazing. So I had the most fulfilling period of my career at medical oncology, working at University of Pretoria. Shout out to them. And then of course COVID hit, and when COVID hit, oh my God, everything, the world came to a halt. There was a panic, and everything just didn't make sense. Even our role, I mean, even our roles was under threat. We were questioning our sustainability in that department. So, because I mean, working in clinical trials and working at a site, you're actually depending on sponsors, pharmaceutical companies giving you project to be able to, continue the work. So yeah, but COVID brought so many challenges in terms of the clinical trial logistics. We had to take extraordinary measures in terms of scheduling of our patients to do, protocol specified procedures and all that. Really, really interesting. I mean, it was challenging, but it was interesting. You learn a lot. You have to establish, cross-functional collaborations with other units. I started working closely with the histology department, NHLS at Steve Biko. Not, I mean, it was actually not Steve Biko, Tshwane District Hospital. NHLS histology, there were challenges in terms of retrieving archival tissue samples and all that. But I mean, overall, we were able to overcome all those challenges. And but one thing I must say is that during COVID, that's when there was a higher need for people with experience in clinical research to monitor a lot of COVID clinical trials. So there were a lot of clinical trials that were coming into the country at the time that were related to COVID. And the pharmaceutical companies and the clinical research organizations were looking for people that were already GCP trained, that were already working in clinical trials, that could be fast tracked into becoming CRAs. So guess what? I was then headhunted on LinkedIn. I was headhunted on LinkedIn. So anyway, anyone that follows me on LinkedIn, they would know that I'm very active, and that's one thing that I always advocate for. To say that if you are interested in a particular role, you have to have a share of voice in the closed peer-to-peer networks or groups on social media. And that increases your visibility. And whenever opportunities like that come up, people will always have your name in mind because you are commenting on their post. You are reposting, or you are you know connecting. And sometimes you reach out to people that are in roles that you are interested in, and you want them to explain what is it that they really really do. So I was headhunted on LinkedIn to say, here's an opportunity. If you want to apply, send your application ASAP. And I applied, and lo and behold, I got the role. I got the role, and the role was promising to actually offer training for 4 to 6 months into a CRA role. And I was lucky to be in the role for 4 months, and then I was thrown in the deep end to say start monitoring. And the first monitoring role that I had was in infectious disease trial. And at this point, what they were doing is that they were taking more senior people, throwing them into COVID trials, and then taking all the other infectious disease trials, giving them to the juniors, this newly appointed people. And I had a infectious disease trial in Kenya, guys, in Kenya. So I was traveling to Kenya almost every second week to monitor in the very rural Kenya, two counties, Kericho, Kisumu, in there. And I would go to these rural clinics and monitor a Shigella vaccine trial, you know. But I mean, of course, working as a CRA, working for a CRO, you do not get assigned just one project. So they added my FTE, they assigned me to other trials, which were COVID in HIV patients. So I was doing COVID trials as well. And then, but because I was still interested in oncology, when there was a survival follow-up study that where somebody had to hand over because the person was leaving, I raised my hand and like, give me the oncology oncology trial. So I've always loved oncology, and then of course I got in the oncology trial. I was traveling to Cape Town monitoring this oncology trial. And then after some time staying, I mean, working in this contract research organization, CRO, I was then I told my manager, look, I'm now ready to shed off, infectious disease trials. I mean, uh, I'm sure Puseletso would find this strange, but look, I'm not an infectious disease person. So I was so ready to shed it off to say, look, give it to somebody else. I'll do something else. I'll do like oncology full time. And so when an opportunity came, I was fully um, what do they call FSP? So FSP is like functional service provision. So that's where they commit you to one sponsor, and then you are monitoring for that particular sponsor. And then I was committed to a company down the road, and I was doing oncology studies. The company down the road, I ended up working as a company down the road as an oncology CRA. Okay, and also, I mean, having worked there, it was amazing. There's this familiarity. If you are thrown into a discipline or therapeutic area where you have expertise, things are just seamless. That's where you're able to shine. I'm not saying to people that you should fixate your mind to one therapeutic area. It's not good for your career long term. You should open up yourself like I did, to say I can do that. I'm raising my hand to gain experience, and build the necessary competencies of a CRA with infectious disease trials. But at the back of my head, I knew that I would function better into in a oncology therapeutic area, you know. So that's what happened there. And then of course, again, this would seem like I'm now exaggerating, but it's true. I was again headhunted for an MSL role. Okay, so I cannot not emphasize how important it is to have LinkedIn presence, be active on LinkedIn, talk to people on LinkedIn, post, repost, do that type of thing. So again, I would say the MSL role, I had a discussion with a recruiter again on LinkedIn asking me about the interest. Would you be interested in this role? I looked at your profile. Would you be interested in this role? And I said, of course. But I mean, think about this. About 2019, pre-COVID, um, I had applied for an MSL role or medical science liaison role. Okay. And I had applied for the same company I'm now working at. But at the time, I did not have that much experience in clinical trials. I was not even considered. I did not even get a interview, whatever. Okay. But this time, a few years later, when the recruiter said that I see your experience, you've captured your experience, the projects that you've done, all this on your profile. Would you be interested in this role? And the role was actually in diabetes. Imagine. So nowhere in my LinkedIn profile did I mention that I've ever worked in diabetes or done anything in diabetes. The only experience that I had with diabetes was when I was in school. Studying medical laboratory sciences, what's nice about it is that you get a full circle exposure of all the pathology disciplines. Okay, so clinical chemistry is part of all the disciplines that they offer. And then, of course, you would have done the modules, clinical chemistry
I
one,
want to
two, three, and all
collaborate
that.
with them on.
Is there a question? Okay, somebody just got unmuted there. So anyway, what I'm trying to say is this. Yeah, the only exposure I had with diabetes, or the only experience that I had was at school. So by then, anyway, the person reached out to me and said, would you be interested in an MSL diabetes, but to be based in Cape Town? And I said, sure, because why? Cape Town was a familiar space. I studied in Cape Town, okay, and they're looking for an MSL. And then, of course, I had applied for an MSL role, but I didn't get it. So basically, I knew what an MSL role is about. But now, when the opportunity came, I said, sure, let's go through the process. And then she did the screening, interviewed, and invited me to talk to therapeutic area expert. My goodness, when I got invited for an opportunity to interview, you cannot believe how much preparation I had to do. I had to ask my sister, who's working in clinical chemistry, to forward me all the all the notes, all the books related to diabetes, to read diabetes 101. Yes. And of course, MSL role, as much as it's a therapeutic area focused, all they want, the skills that they want are pretty much transversal skills. The skills that you gain, from clinical research. So that was sufficient as well. They want. I would give you an example. They would give you like a research paper, okay, a full research paper, and then they would give you 24 hours to put together a slide deck and then be able to critique or communicate the science of that paper to the interviewing panel within 24 hours. You would have prepared the slides, and then now you have to share the insights of basically the interpretation of what the study was about, what is the significance, what were the primary endpoint, secondary endpoints, what can you conclude from that, and how does it affect clinical practice. So they had put me under that level of pressure. And of course, I mean, I was ready for the task, and I was excited because this is the stuff that I wanted, and then I didn't get. So I'm like, I'm gonna put my all in getting this. And I interviewed, and I got the role. I got the role as an MSL. So I mean, I know Puseletso was asking me to say that in every part of those breaking moments, what were the major challenges, with transitions, one thing for me, I would say, is that every time you transition to a new role, you realize that, you don't have to know everything at the beginning, but you must commit yourself to be on I don't know, like you should actually get into a frame of thinking that you need to fast track your upskilling. So you have to literally spend time more than even anyone else reading on the subject. And that's exactly what I did. Okay. I spend, you know, every day reading about diabetes, getting to know everything. And you know what? Um, when you get exposed to a particular field at university, um, theory wise, you tend to think that it's just this little. Like, I mean, Puseletso is a microbiologist. If she's talking microbiology, I might just think, oh no, microbiology is just bacteriology. And then if you now go into microbiology and you realize that, oh, there's parasitology, there is virology, there is a lot more than bacteriology. You're not just doing gram stain. You are going to see schistosomiasis. You're going to diagnose bilharzia, all that stuff. So that's what happened with me when I moved into the diabetes space. I realized that I had actually thought it's just this straightforward thing. And now I'm enjoying it because it just opened up a field that's really exciting. And the fact that diabetes is a systemic disease that affects so many organ systems in a body, it's exciting. There's always new information related to diabetes, so I'm loving it. I'm loving the therapeutic area. And I had remained in the therapeutic area for a year before I transitioned into immunology. So again, the company was going through some restructuring, and then there was an opportunity to move into an immunology because there was a need there. There's a drug an immunotherapy drug that we have where I work. So they wanted support in terms of scientific engagement, collecting insights, and that type of thing. So I mean, diabetes is quite an established portfolio where I work. So they wanted insights in terms of this innovative therapy that they had just launched. So I mean, again, I'm opening myself to opportunities where I can learn other things. So I moved into that space, to learn a little bit about immunology. And I mean, of course, in my undergrad, I did immunology as well as a module. And then when I did my in-service trainings, I had spent time in an immunology lab. I know exactly what they test for. I know what the type of tests that are there. So even when I moved into an immunology portfolio, there were certain things that already made sense. There was a foundation laid for me. Okay. So the part that I had to upskill on was the clinical part of it in terms of how it's treated clinically. What are the clinical tests that are done and this was specifically for asthma and atopic dermatitis. So pretty much, I would say overall, at this point, I'm just demonstrating that I had to be very agile in my approach in my career. I'm open to opportunities and any opportunities to learn something new. I welcome it without reservation. I think I had so much curiosity that anything new, anything exciting, I want to learn about it. And again, I think that's one feature that I would say has been consistent across my career and the transitions that I've made. It is the curiosity, the hunger for knowledge, and and that thing of saying I'm not going to say second guess myself, because at this point I don't know. When an opportunity comes, I'm gonna take hold of the opportunity and hope that I will actually learn in the process as fast as possible. So again, it's a very important skill that no one is going to teach you. Adaptability is key. Working in a science space, you have to innovate, you have to be very adaptable person. I don't know, Puseletso, if you have anything specific that you want to ask at this point. I see I've been speaking now for quite some time. Or anyone would like to unmute and ask?
Hi, Bello ALC. I see your hand is up. You can ask your question.
Yes, thank you, Melisufe. Good evening, everyone. Good evening, Ntate Monaheng, Melisufe, and everyone else in the meeting. My name is Debello Komani, and I'm really excited to be a part of this meeting. It feels like home because my dad's name was Monaheng, and I have an aunt whose name is Puseletso. So
Oh,
it really feels like home. But I am excited to join because the Dimnahing has a background in genetics. And when I started my career in academics, I started at the University of the Free State. I was doing human molecular biology because I was interested in genetics. So I ran out of funds and then I dropped out at UOFS. I continued with UNISA. So UNISA doesn't have human molecular biology. And then I converted from human molecular biology to BSc life science genetics and microbiology. From then on, I completed a postgraduate diploma in public health at the University of Pretoria last year. And right now, I'm currently in my final year of my public health, master's in public health at the University of Pretoria. And I'm currently unemployed and I have no funding. So I'm looking for jobs in my industry. However, if I don't find a job, I am open to pursuing a PhD in epidemiology or public health next year. And Demunaheng, you mentioned something really interesting. You spoke about the good clinical practice certificate. So I just completed one, but it's with the Global Health Network. So I don't think it's accredited with the HPCSA. And the reason I completed this is because I see a lot of BSc graduates who can't find jobs like me end up going the CRA route. So I wanted to find out the good clinical practice certificate that I have, the international one. Is there something I can find with it? And also, are there any like volunteer opportunities for someone of my background, genetics and microbiology, but now I've moved into public health. So if there are any internship or volunteer opportunities or even sponsorship for PhD, please let me know. Thank you so much.
absolutely. Sure. You know what? I would like to congratulate you that, you had done so many things as well. So you're very open, like I am. You remind me of, yeah, because I mean, sometimes people might say that you seem to be like all over the place, and they would even say, you seem to be the jack of all trades and a master of none. But in this space that we live in and where the world is going, it seems like it's beneficial to actually be the jack of all trades. Having like a very focused, technical expertise. Sometimes it works. Sometimes it works. It's at your detriment. So sometimes whenever you get an opportunity to expand your reach of skills, competencies. Do that. You know, at the moment, I'm interested in digital transformation. I'm doing my PhD on in clinical research, but specifically focusing on digital transformation, and the regulations of electronic health records or digital health technologies. So I'm expanding myself in that direction because that's where the world is going. Coming back to Belo's question, or maybe to say, like, where do you look for opportunities? As I said, LinkedIn is the most powerful tool that everyone should be using. If you're a science graduate, if you are pursuing your higher degrees, make sure that any area of expertise or any therapeutic area that you are interested in, you join the groups, you follow the people that are in that space, communicate with them, seek mentorship from them, try and find out what is it that they do. And those are the very people that would actually link you up to opportunities. Coming back to what I said about a friend of mine who was a medical technologist, qualified in cytogenetics, but working at the University of Pretoria as a data manager or natural scientist, I wouldn't have known that he's working as a study coordinator if I did not reach out. So the nomenclature of the different roles that people do differ. I might be a medical manager today, um, where I work, but another company elsewhere might advertise the same role as a medical lead or as a medical advisor, but it's pretty much the same thing. So it's important to reach out to people, find out, when you say you're a medical manager, what does that mean? And how can I tap into that space? Of course, I mean, we would, depending on availability. So you cannot just reach out to one person. There are many of people on LinkedIn that have the same title as me, even sometimes not in South Africa. We have to reach out to them. You form networks not just in South Africa, but everywhere, especially if you want to get into global medical affairs or global pharmaceutical companies. Reach out to people anywhere, even a person in Brazil. There are roles that I've interviewed for where I've reached out to a person in Brazil and asked, what is the role about? And the person set up a meeting and explained everything, answered all my questions. So it's important to leverage on those opportunities for networking. I think somebody also asked me if I had spoken about my SAPRA oncology, being a SAPRA oncology reviewer. That's an interesting one. You'd be surprised in that when I moved into clinical research and I started working as a CRA, because oncology is such a niche area, when the oncology clinical trials would come into South Africa, they would be out of reviewers because most of the oncologists were participating as investigators in those trials. So they wanted somebody who has a background in oncology that can be impartial, and be able to review objectively, so that's how I actually saw that role advertised online. It was not even actually a job. It was advertised as an expression of interest. And there are a lot of these type of opportunities that get advertised online, on LinkedIn mostly, that seems like they are, over the top. And a lot of science graduate, even those with PhDs and postdoc, they shy away from applying for these roles because they're like, I'm not a professor yet. I'm not this and this. I mean, Bella said that she wants to study public health. There are a lot of opportunities that actually get advertised by the Africa CDC at the moment. Those are the opportunities that you should be pursuing and applying. And don't think that, oh no, I don't have my PhD yet, I might not. What if you get in? Literally, I was in that clinical trials committee as the only mister. Everybody else had a doctor title or was a professor. How did that happen? It's because I raised my hand and I said, I want to do it. And they interviewed me. They checked if I had the necessary knowledge and expertise or skills to do it. And they were able to vet me because I do my homework. If it's something that I want, I'm gonna make sure that I leave no stone unturned. I'm gonna know so much about it that I would know even the things that you would not think I would know. Because literally, when I interviewed with the regulatory authority, they asked me about the Medicines and Related Substances Act, because it is the foundation of the institution itself. It's actually based on that act, you know. So they asked me about Section 21C of that act upon the first interview. But because I worked in clinical research space, I would hear colleagues talk about this type of things, and then I had read about them, and that's what impressed them. So that's what I'm saying, that let nothing go, you know, not be in your radar. So if you're interested in a particular field, know as much as possible in that field. And you don't have to be an expert, you know, who knows. If Puseletso is now a microbiologist, she cannot just know about Staphylococcus. There's a whole lot of other things that she has to know in microbiology and stuff. Even though she might have done her master's and PhD in Staphylococcus aureus, staph, you know, or resistance thereof. But she doesn't only need to know staph. She needs to know everything in microbiology. And you know, pretty much, if you want to register with the HPCSA, that's their specifications. You have to know everything under the domain of that you want to register in. Okay. Puseletso, is it time now that we can go take questions in the chat, perhaps?
We have hands. We do have questions in the chat. Let's deal with the three hands we have now first.
Awesome.
Lerato Muteki was one of the first ones. So Lerato, you can unmute and ask your question.
Thank you so much, Puseletso and Ntate Monaheng. I wanted to ask, I think my questions are really specific with HPCSA registration. As we have previously discussed, Puseletso, I really am struggling to get into South Africa. Well, I have a diploma in medical laboratory sciences, and I have a degree in health sciences, and I have a postgraduate diploma in evaluation of financial investments in public health and supply chain. And I am currently enrolled to study MSc in financial engineering with a special interest in risk management and health economics. So now, at this point in my life, I think it's either academia, go into lecturing, or clinical trials. So I've done a lot of certificates in clinical trials for career development. And yeah, I'm a Mosotho, a typical Mosotho scientist who is ambitious, but it's really difficult to get into your space in South Africa. How would you I cannot say it's mentorship per se, but how would you guide me to get there as somebody who has done clinical trials, who has been through clinical trials and everything that's related to it? Thank you.
All right, awesome. I would say, you know, like there's a lot of interest into getting into clinical trials. And I think now um, there's more demand because almost every science graduate is aware of clinical trials and the impact of clinical trials in patients' lives. So I think a lot of people are now having interest in clinical trials. And I think I must acknowledge to say that to get into clinical trials is very tricky. There's a lot of red tape into getting clinical trials. They always seek people that have experience. You know, if it's not experience, they will say you must have GCP. If it's not international GCP, you must have South African GCP. So there's always tricks in terms of what what they require. But one thing I must say is this: you must be willing to start from the bottom. Okay. At the moment in South Africa, you do not just have clinical trials being done by contract research organizations or the CROs. Okay, you have clinical research being done by laboratories as well. Like if you are interested in clinical trials, you could enter into clinical trials through working at a laboratory, pathology laboratory that only process clinical trial samples. And there are a few of those, and they are not known. Okay, they do not appear in the list of pathology companies when you go online. You have to be intentional and find out those pathology labs that process clinical research samples. Okay, so you can enter through that. And then secondly, you can enter through a site management organizations. So there are some organizations in South Africa whereby you have a clinical trialist, established clinical trialist, but they do not have the necessary physical resources, like a site, a clinical research site, and they do not have the necessary equipment to run clinical trials. And such organizations or SMOs, they offer capacity. They offer the trialists um, um, physical spaces. They offer them resources like refrigerated centrifuges, minus 80 degrees, whatnot. So they have resources. They bridge the gap. So if you're really interested in clinical trials, sometimes reach out to people that work at SMOs because they work with a lot other pharmaceutical clients. They service a lot other pharmaceutical clients, and they might give you an opportunity or might give you an awareness of opportunities that exist. So again, bottom line is that you have to network. Use LinkedIn to connect to people and have a full understanding of the entire ecosystem that you want to function in. If it's clinical trials that you're interested in, you have to understand all the other smaller corners where you might find opportunities, because entering the system from the top is not always possible. Even if you are the most qualified person with a PhD in clinical research, you might still find a challenge in terms of getting or securing a clinical trials role because of the demand again. So I've seen when I was working in a CRO, I've noticed that when they open up an opportunity for even an in-house CRA, which is a support role, you find the applicants, the people that apply for such roles, mostly having masters and PhDs. So now imagine if you are now competing with such a pool of highly skilled and highly qualified people, what are the chances? You're gambling, the odds are really not in your favor. So those are the type of challenges. And I think somebody did rightfully there mention the pathology labs that process clinical trials, site space, BARC, and the rest. There are some that are not here that specifically focus on the processing of oncology samples. Okay.
All right, thank you. So we're gonna move on to Lelo. Lelo, will you unmute and then ask us your question?
Good evening, everybody. Thank you very much, Puseletso, and thank you, Ntate Monaheng, for hosting this session for us. So my question is, and the question that I'm asking, I'm going to ask it, I would say again, because I think I DM'd you on LinkedIn last year, and I never really got a response on it. So I saw this as an opportunity to actually have to ask you this in the session. So I wanted to ask, I'm currently in academia, and I wanted to ask, what are the skills, or how can I upskill, and which opportunities can I try and apply for if I'm looking at roles such as medical advisor and medical science liaison? Because I'm passionate about research, and more especially, I've been doing like diabetes research from my master's level, and I've completed my PhD. So I'm looking to penetrate into that space, and I just wanted to know what is the best way to transition from like the academic space into that space. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. Thanks for the question. I would say in my experience, I noticed that the roles in clinical research, medical affairs, requires a very thorough understanding of the clinical picture. Okay, so the one thing about scientists is that we know a lot about the science, but to translate the science into what does it mean for the patient, that's where we struggle. And again, in my role as an MSL, somebody asked what exactly is an MSL. So what do MSLs do? So medical science liaison are people, to put it simply, are people that read the papers in the therapeutic area. For example, you mentioned diabetes, you would read the paper, a new paper or the latest evidence, Okay, and then you go to the doctor and tell the doctor about the latest research in the diabetes care space. You know, so basically, you ask yourself, what would a busy clinician at Mediclinic, what would they want to know? They're not going to want to know about the mode of action. I'll give you an example of this, or obesity medicines. They're not going to want to know the mode of action in terms of how a GLP-1 receptor agonist interacts in the brain and which pathways or transduction pathway is going to, they're not interested in that. They want to know, okay, good and well, that I see, I'll read in my time. Tell me, how does this piece of evidence affect my clinical practice? Me seeing a patient tomorrow. What do I tell the patient? So the key takeaways has to be clinical. So bridging the gap between science and clinical practice is what a medical science liaison does. Secondly, a medical science liaison is a person that's going to listen to the doctor, tell you about the challenges that they have as healthcare professional and the challenges that patients have. Okay, so you are able to identify now the pain points, in the patient flow, in the patient journey. You are able to identify the challenges from a HCP perspective, and you are able to identify the challenges in the healthcare ecosystem. And you collect those insights back into a pharmaceutical company to inform the medical strategy, to say, guys, perhaps we are not addressing the people's problems. Okay, here are the insights that I got from having seen Dr. Such and Such. Dr. Such and Such tells me that their patient are experiencing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And I feel like we need to change the strategy to address those pain points. That's what a medical science liaison does. But pretty much, you are a therapeutic area expert. You're supposed to know, you have a wealth of knowledge in terms of that domain, and you know the latest advances in that particular therapeutic area, and you need to learn how to communicate that effectively. Okay, so talking about the soft skills, communication is important. And just because you read an 8-page or a 10-page document, you have to be able to nitpick what is of relevance to this doctor. Okay, and of course, in your journey or in your day-to-day operations as a medical science liaison, you're going to meet a person that is an opinion leader that wants to know the study design. That will actually do a deep dive in terms of the statistical plan. Why did they choose specific statistical strategies to analyze that? And is the data that you're presenting generalizable or not? You get those. But in your preparation, you should have that level or high level ability to actually operate at a high level, to be able to give a busy clinician a high level overview of what the study is about. Okay, and then of course in your preparation you should also prepare for depth in case you meet a person that's an opinion leader that will want to know the nooks and crevices of a particular study, and then they would question you in that line. So you should be prepared. Okay, so I don't know if maybe that answers your question, but yeah, pretty much effective communication is important. Bridging science and clinical practice is important in this type of roles.
All right. So we're gonna move on to Maputi Maboya. You can unmute your mic and give us your question as well.
Hello, can everyone hear me? Can everyone hear me?
Sure.
Yes, we can.
Yes. Okay, thank you so much, guys, for setting up this meeting. And I enjoyed everything that Mr. Monaheng had said about clinical research, because I'm really, really interested and low-key passionate about that space, right? So, sir, I'm in an interesting situation. So, okay, I'm still doing my undergrad, right, in biomedicine. And I'm in my 3rd year. And I'm in a position where, okay, sharp, I have my GCP certifications. I also have I did an ALX program in data analytics that I completed. I'll post it on LinkedIn soon. But this is what I did so far. And I do have mentors that are mentoring me within the clinical research space, people that work for ICON, PPD, per Excel. Yes, I do have them. However, I'm in a situation where I have one module that I had failed, and it is extending my degree by just a bit. And then I have like free time in between, like after third year, I have my free time. And the module that I am going to be doing again is at the end of next year. So I have this thing where all of my modules will be done apart from that one module. So in between there, I have free time. So is it possible that I could like apply for like a clinical trial coordinator, clinical trial assistant role, or maybe like, be in a space where I could work within this clinical research space while I wait for that one module to do it?
Yeah, absolutely, you can. And as I said before, the best place to be able to do that is at SMO. SMO is Site Management Organization. Other places, I can tell you, it's very difficult. They are bombarded with applications left, right, and center. For you to really get
Yes.
an opportunity to see how clinical trials are run is through an SMO. I'm just trying to remember the SMO that actually the biggest SMO in South Africa. I'll remember just now, but I have the person, the founder of that SMO on my LinkedIn. So I would
Yes,
say
sir.
it would be prudent for you to reach out to that person and ask for opportunities that are there. And just last year, I was in Walter Sisulu University, and then I met this graduate in while we were doing a talk at Walter Sisulu University. And then the graduate told me that she reached out to this particular gentleman, and she had gotten an opportunity to do like an internship at this SMO. So what I'm saying is this: reach out to this particular organization, try and connect to this individual online. I'm trying to find their name. Okay,
Yes,
there
yes,
we
yes.
go. So the SMO's name is, I'll tell you just now, Crismo.
Crismo.
Mm.
Okay.
Crismo.
No, I can find it on LinkedIn. Yeah?
Yes, you just Google Crismo.
Word. Okay, okay. I see it. I see it. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Because
Awesome.
like, and what I also love about clinical research is that it is kind of corporate from what I see and from what they've told me, my mentors have told me. And my personality is perfectly suited for the corporate space. So I know that once I get I get into that space, I'm going to kill it. So thank you so much.
Awesome, awesome. I have confidence that you will. So yeah, again, I just want to touch base on the question that I saw there. Working as a CRA, working as an MSL, working in any of the client-facing roles requires soft skills, and the soft skills you don't learn them at university. I mean, to be able to just raise up your hand and ask a question like this is already a demonstration of a soft skill. Okay, you gotta be the person that's curious enough and courageous enough to ask the things that are going to benefit you. Okay, and again, secondly, I think it's important to realize that when you're doing stakeholder engagement, you have to learn to build rapport, to have some form of camaraderie. And sometimes when you're dealing with highly qualified or people that are at the top of their careers, they can come across as egotistic, or they can come across as very proud because they're very accomplished. Those are the type of challenges that you need to overcome in terms of your communication. How to navigate talking to a person and getting to their heart, or letting them give you their attention, which is valuable attention. So it requires some form of rapport in your communication. And again, it drills back to building effective communication skills, being able to read the room and when to hit hard with the science, or start asking about the weather and politics and golf, soccer and stuff. So you have to have a very calculated approach in terms of stakeholder engagement. It's a very essential skills if you want to get into client-facing roles.
Okay, so we we have run out of the 1 hour has passed, but there's still
Yeah,
questions. So
no worries. I think we can do the chats.
yeah,
Puseletso.
So we have one last hand. It's Lincoln. Lincoln, can you please unmute and then ask your question, and then after this we'll go to the ones in the chat.
Okay, great. By the way, like, thank you, like, for a great talk, and like also like for sharing your journey. I've got two questions here. So, like, my first one is, how do you manage the intense work of the PhD and also like the industrial, like, since now, like you're saying, you are in MSL. And also, like, my second question is, in a nutshell, what are some of the most important lessons you've learned throughout your career and how they've shaped your approach to be who you are now?
Absolutely. First of all, in terms of the balance, that's one question I always ask I get asked a lot, even when I'm applying for other roles outside, you know. So basically, I have kind of conditioned my mind to say, you know what, you are doing a research degree, and there is no rush. Whether you graduate next year or in 2 years' time or in 3 years' time, you will eventually finish it. So for me, I'm prioritizing, work-life balance, but at the same time, PhD and the completion thereof, it's something that I have conditioned my mind that this is a research degree and I'll finish it when I finish it. So I do not have a target time in terms of, and I've seen it with my masters. The project took longer than what most people take in their in completing their masters. And I mean, I'm on my own journey and I'm not competing with anyone. And I was able to finish my masters and graduated with distinction, but it took me longer than most people. So it's all about your goals, and it's all about the standards that you set for yourself. So if I had set a standard to say I want to complete my PhD in 2 years, I would complete it in 2 years because I would put all the energy and the effort to complete it in 2 years. But the stance that I've taken is that I'm doing a research, and I'm in the process of compiling my research. I'm learning something. So I'm working towards becoming an expert in digital transformation. So I don't want to do it over 2 years and then submit, and then my thesis is going to be put in the university libraries and nobody's going to freaking read it. So what I'm doing is that I know it's going to become relevant in the future. So I need to gather as much knowledge and expertise as necessary. Awesome. I think I answered your question. So the second question was related to, I forgot. Puseletso might remind me.
So, like, it was, what are some of the most lesson you've learned throughout your
Awesome.
career?
Awesome. So the lesson that I learned is that do not be afraid to start from scratch. Okay. It doesn't matter at what pinnacle you have achieved, in your career. For example, when I had to make a transition from having done bachelor's of health science and having to say I'm taking a completely different route, a lot of people were like, that doesn't make sense. You spend so much money and effort in doing this, and then you're going to leave it like that. The nice thing is that I didn't leave it unfinished. I finished it off. I got my registration, HPCSA registration, which I'm still maintaining even now. You know, um, should it be required in the future? I have it. But the thing is, I had to learn the important lesson of saying that sometimes when you get yourself in a situation you realize it doesn't serve you anymore, you should be willing to start from scratch and look for a path that would make sense for you. Even if you get a job and then you find yourself in a particular work culture, if it doesn't align with your values, don't be a person that's hesitant to say, oh, I bought a car and I'm paying my installment and I'll be stuck here for 6 years so that I can finish my. No, you gotta be a person that's courageous enough to say, you know what, this does not align with my values. I'll take back the car to the dealership, and then I will pursue the stuff that I want to do, or the stuff that aligns with my passions and aspirations and whatever. So that's important for me. And again, the second major lesson that I learned is that you have to learn to communicate with clarity. Whenever you're going in interviews and stuff like that, you have to communicate in clarity in terms of the alignment of your skills, your work history or your education with the careers that you want to get into. I've gotten into a discussion with a person that told me that they're an entrepreneur, And I think we spent about 3 minutes for me to get to the bottom of what is it that you really do, and the question was simple, was like, okay, what work do you do? Okay. And the person told me that I'm a business owner, I'm an entrepreneur, but at the end I was like, I'm not getting, you are speaking, but you're not saying anything. What is it that you do? So you're being given an opportunity, 3 minutes or 2 minutes, and in opportunity to pitch yourself. You should be able to communicate that with clarity, and that's important. And that's what separates a lot of people that are coming from academics to people that have been working in pharma, or working in industry in general. Working in industry, people, they know how to communicate alignment in terms of what the role that they're applying for, even if it's not necessarily directly related. For example, the fact that I worked as a cytogeneticist and I was reading chromosome and I was able to come up with diagnosis from reading chromosome. I don't need to say that I was reading chromosome necessarily, but I can say as a person, as a scientist, I have attention to details. So that means I'm a person that can read between the lines and be able to derive some insights from stuff that might not be obvious to everyone. So it's a skill that I have, and I was able to apply the same skill in terms of dossier review, because they want somebody who's going to read between the lines and apply their mind in terms of what information that were given. Yeah, so it's just a matter of seeing that and learning how to do that. Okay, so for me, that's one thing that I realize is still a challenge for a lot of people. The fact that you've been exposed to HPLC, I mean, coming from genetics, I can mention that I've done PCR, I've done MLPA, I've done Sanger sequencing. That is immaterial. What does Sanger sequencing mean for industry? So there must be something that you tie with having done Sanger sequencing. What skill is transferable that you learned from having done Sanger sequencing? I don't know if I'm making sense.
You are. So, you've most of the questions within the chat, I see one way or another, you've actually answered them. The only one that I can see that really stands out now is the one from Kiabetswe Mokori, which asks, was there a moment you doubted your path, and what helped you push through or push through during your pivots?
Yeah, that's always going to be the case, Kiabetswe, where you're gonna second guess yourself. But the what I said earlier on is just do it. The thing is, you never know if you're gonna make it or not. So staying there in your corner and saying that I might not be good enough, and not doing anything about it, you will remain there in your little corner. But if you're gonna say, you know what, I don't like, for example, do you think that I was always confident that I'm this review, I'm in a clinical trials committee? I would see the reports, the recommendation that's sent to the CEO, and then in the list of people that actually contributed to the recommendation report to the CEO at SAPRA, I would see a column or two columns with the names of the reviewers in the committee. And I would realize that, oh, I'm the only one who's a minister here, who's a mister. And I'd be like, everybody here is a doctor or professor. And I would ask myself, how did I get into this? How did I get into this? So sometimes it's a natural thing to second guess yourself. It's like, am I really, am I really qualified to be here? Am I really qualified to be doing the work that I do? It's called imposter syndrome. Okay. And a lot of Black folks in corporate have imposter syndrome. Even the most, even the best orators in the space, they still, second guess themselves like, oh, did I say? It's natural. It's okay. But what I'm saying is that do not let that prevent you from latching into opportunities. When you get given an opportunity, take it with your hands. I mean, embrace it, fully, and learn what's necessary for you to be able to do it with excellence. And excellence will always be recognized. So if you are doing something excellently, people will recognize you. Okay. And then for me, I'm not scared to do anything. I've learned over the years that anything can be learned. Okay, anything can be learned. So in conclusion, so to speak.
Sorry to disturb you there.
Yeah.
We have exactly 3 minutes. So it has to
Awesome.
be in conclusion, because Lincoln says that it's gonna kick us out in those 3 minutes. So you can give a conclusion.
Um, awesome. So yeah, in conclusion, I've learned that it doesn't matter if you work in the lab, it doesn't matter you part of in boardrooms, you are in auditoriums, you are lecturing, you are, at the crossroads where you're not sure what you're doing. What's really important is that every role is meaningful if your why is rooted in service, okay, that you want to serve, okay, and then you will always get an opportunity to serve, okay. So that I would conclude it there. I'll conclude it there, Puseletso.
Okay. Guys, unfortunately, we can't take any more questions because I see the questions are starting to come in still. And there's a hand up. I'm so sorry, we can't. We could go on forever and ever, especially with clinical trials and careers and everything. We'd just like to thank Neo for coming and really speaking to us and showing us a person of action. I would like to think I'm the same as him. I, with everything that is said, take risks, don't overthink things, and don't what do you call, stand with the standard of the world. If you can say that you have a car, and but you want to change careers, this car is going to keep you backwards. Take back the car to the garage, go and start over again. There's nothing wrong with that. But in all honesty, we appreciate all your advice. We have had you. I would like to think that if people still have questions, they can inbox you. You'll answer them when you have time, because I'm sure you're gonna get more
Yeah.
questions. We thank you very much, and with that, we can close the meeting. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you so much, Puseletso.
Thank you so much,
And
everyone.
yeah, good evening to everyone. Bye.
Cheers.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you.
Cheers. Keep well.